One of my favorite things when it comes to Chicago and sports is when you're able to see an awesome event or a unique event come to the city and expose it to a whole different demographic of not just sports fan, but part of the country, part of the little towns, the different demographics that we see in this awesome melting pots of the United States. And it looks like we might be getting something that can do that once again in the city of Chicago. We're here on the Sports Cubicle. It's the marvelous one, Dan Marver. It's Devin Tingle, Paul Chivari, and myself, Mike Mercado, as Lori Lightfoot has taken a couple of L's recently, and some of it her own doing, some of it not, with the Chicago Bears moving to Arlington Heights. But now this story has been broken. And it's funny, it comes off of all the street racing that has been happening in Chicago where they're going to tow your car, because for the first time in 75 years, NASCAR has announced a street race, and it will take place in downtown Chicago in 2023. This comes to us from NBC5 Chicago. The 2.2-mile track will take drivers past some of the most iconic landmarks in the city, including Grand Park, Buckingham Fountain, the Chicago Field Museum, and more. The race is scheduled to take place July 1st and 2nd of 2023, and they have already proposed a map of the entire course layout, which you can check out on social media. And marvelous one, it's a funny story that you could see all of the new racetracks, and you can see what this is going to happen. And I'll tell you why I think this is a fun story. Not just because, okay, the scenic route of it, right? Just the Goodyear blimp view from the bird's eye view of seeing downtown Chicago and a cool racetrack. It's going to look awesome. But let's be honest, right? NASCAR is a Southern sport. It's a Southeast sport. It's an SEC sport, okay? If you love Georgia, if you love Alabama, if you love Auburn, there's a good chance you are watching everything NASCAR has to offer. But you're probably not watching a lot of other things that are more urban, more in the lines of New York, Chicago, Los Angeles. It's just not the same culture. At least that's what it may be perceived to be. So to have people come to Chicago that normally wouldn't, from Myrtle Beach, from North South Carolina, from Tallahassee, you start thinking about where some of these circuits are, and now you get to have them come to Chicago, because we know NASCAR fans are diehard. We know that they're going to go, they travel hard, that they're going to go to these races. And I think there is something really cool about bringing them to a city that they might have a negative view on. Our city is not perfect. It's far from it, but it is a world-class city. And to have people being able to come up here that may never have been exposed to it, I think that's what's really unique about it. I think it's going to be a nightmare for the residents of Chicago, but when it comes to exposing ourselves to a whole different part of the world in our own country, I think that's a great win for the city of Chicago and for NASCAR. What did you think when you heard this crazy story from Lori Lightfoot, from the city, from NASCAR, that street racing is coming to Chicago in 2023?
Well, the first thing I thought of is that I'm leaving town that weekend. And secondly, be careful when you talk about anything where you're exposing yourself. But
fair enough. One time, marvelous one.
Okay.
And our listeners here on WCPT will make sure that never happens again.
Okay. Well, the straightaway is going to be along Columbus Drive, South Columbus, running along the iconic Buckingham Fountain. It goes down as far as Roosevelt, and it will come back and blah, blah, blah. So it looks like an iconic, look through the whole area, going back down Jackson, the Art Institute, and blah, 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 Columbus Drive for the straightaway. So it should be nice and scenic. Hopefully it won't be raining too hard, and there'll be a good crowd. So basically, it's good for the economy. The hotels will be full if they weren't going to be on the 4th of July weekend anyway. But I think, like you say, it's more of a Southern sport. I don't know if they've done this in New York or Philly or Detroit. I think Detroit actually did it. Yeah. And now that I think about it, so it's a revenue for the city and whatnot. So that's good. And yeah, as we're taping here, and Ross has just been thrown out of a baseball game.
Good old Rossi. He's been on that road.
Buckner as the umpire is a problem, but that's another subject. So anyway, you can cut that out. So anyway,
going back to on our NASCAR talk.
Going back to the racing, I mean, it's not a sport that I am a big fan of, so I can't comment too much on it. But I will say that, like I say, it will generate revenue, will generate interest. It will, people will see Chicago's beauty instead of the dead bodies from gun violence. So it will be a plus overall for the city of Chicago.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I think it's one thing for people who are here locally when we talk about the gun violence in the Chicago area, when we talk about the food deserts, when we talk about the schools that are being closed and where this violence comes from, where this poverty comes from. And it's one thing for local people to talk about it. It's another thing when it's out of town stupid that talks about it. What about Chicago? As if they care about Chicago. And I think this is a great example of exposing people to the city in its entirety, the reality of the city. Again, the world we're in right now is a very violent place, it seems like.
Yeah.
But this is a world-class place, especially in the summer. And to tell people, the person who grew up in South Carolina, in Alabama, in Georgia, in Tennessee, in Kentucky, even just Kentucky alone, right? Something that's pretty close. To have them change their minds, or to be exposed to a place that you and I take for granted. We make fun of it and we love it, but the idea that we could wake up any day and we're in literally one of the top 10 cities in the entire world when it comes to anything you want. It's going to be really interesting to see how the city pulls this off, if they're able to pull it off, but what it means long-term for a whole new generation of people who never would have thought of coming to Chicago, and they actually stop by and they're like, oh, wait a minute. It isn't that they're shooting at the planes at Midway or O'Hare, that it's not just a giant bean, that there is an entire culture to this city. But it'll be interesting, and we'll see when this comes around next year if David Ross is still the manager of your Chicago Cubs.
You're absolutely correct. Another thought, with all the heat probably that there's going to be, and people getting sick and whatnot, I'm really worried about overcrowded hospitals that weekend.
Whether that's
overcrowded hospitals, that's a big issue that I was never aware of, but it's definitely a problem. I mean, I've heard that in an emergency room at Northwestern, people have to wait more than 12 hours to get in. Isn't that crazy?
It's totally crazy. It's definitely not that this show, the marvelous Marver household and the Mercado household, have been dealing with hospitals for the last 48 to 72 hours, but that's not why you called. You called because NASCAR is coming to downtown Chicago. Let us know your thoughts. Is it going to be a logistical issue? We complain about Soldier Field. What are you going to do when 2 days of NASCAR take down all of our streets? We're on Twitter at Sports Cubicle TV. It's the marvelous one, Dan Marver. It's Devin Tingle. It's Paul Chivari. I'm Mike Mercado.